Hi, today we are going to be working on lesson 19, session 1. We'll be exploring multiplication by a fraction. And we'll be looking, this is our first time really looking at fractions and figuring out how much a fraction of one fraction is of another fraction. That's kind of what we're looking at over the next couple of days. So we're going to be working in our Ready Classroom math workbook. We'll be on pages 391 through page 394. This is one of my favorite things to teach. I think that you'll really begin to enjoy it. And as soon as you kind of see the pattern, you'll see how really easy multiplying fractions really is. So right now, in your Ready Classroom math workbook, go ahead and turn to page 391. So today we're going to really be exploring what does it mean to multiply by a fraction. So in other words, when we're multiplying fractions, it's really, honestly, it's crazy easy to get the answer when we're multiplying fractions. But I really want to make sure or help you to understand what it means, what it really means when we're multiplying by a fraction. So let's go ahead and we're going to look first at number 1. And it says this: shade and label 3 half-inch sections of the ruler. Then complete the sentence and the multiplication equation that represent the total length you shaded. So we're looking at shading 3 half-inch sections of this ruler here at the top. So if I were going to shade 1/2 of an inch, I'm going to go ahead and use my pink highlighter. Now I know that this one is showing me 1 inch. So 1/2 of an inch would be halfway between the 0 and the 1. So this right here is showing me 1/2 of an inch. That is 1/2 of an inch. And so the question is asking us to shade in, I should go back and do that. Hang on, it's telling us to shade 3 1/2 inch sections of the ruler. So I did 1/2 inch section. Now I'm going to use my green highlighter and I'm going to highlight another 1/2 inch section. So right away we can see that 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1 inch. 1/2 of an inch plus 1/2 of an inch is 1 inch. And then if we're going to shade another 1/2 of an inch, we're going to go halfway between 1 and 2, and then shade in that last 1/2 of an inch. So when I shade in 3 1/2 inch sections, I can see here that I have 3 sections of 1/2 of an inch are, how far is that? How far is 3 1/2 of an inch sections? Well, if we're looking at it and we go, okay, well, I can go 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1 inch, and then 1 inch plus 1/2 is 1 1/2 inches. But there's another way that we could do that. We could also say, okay, well, I know that I have this is 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2. Now remember, when we add fractions, we add the numerators and we keep the same denominator. So we have 3 in the numerator and 2 in the denominator because we have 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 3, and then our denominator is the same, so we can add it all together and we keep the denominator of 2. So we have 3 halves, which is also equal to 1 1/2 inches. So when we're multiplying fractions, we could also say saying 3 sections of 1/2 is the same as saying what is 3 times 1/2. We have 1/2, 1/2, 1/2. What is 3 times 1/2? So 3 times 1/2 is 3 halves. And then we remember that 3 halves equals 2 over 2 plus 1 over 2. If we were to break apart this 3 halves into 1 whole and 1 half, or 1 whole and 1 half. If that doesn't make sense to you, it's okay. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep working. And I'm going to show you a cheat, probably not at the end of today, but you will see a cheat as we get a little bit further. Not that I want to call it a cheat. It's like a slightly easier way to do it. But I did want you to see what this looks like. Let's go to number 2. Number 2 says, shade and label 1/2 of a 3-inch section of the ruler. Then complete the sentence and the multiplication equation that represents the total length you shaded. So if we're looking at what is half of a 3-inch section. So the first thing we need to do is we need to mark what 3 inches of this ruler would look like. Here's what 3 inches of this ruler would look like. Now we're trying to see what is halfway between 0 and 3. So we can see that halfway between 0 and 3 is about right here. And the way that you check that is you look and say, okay, on this side of the ruler, I have 1 inch and 1/2. This is 1 inch and 1/2. And then on this half of the ruler, I have 1 inch and 1/2. So from here over to here is 1 inch and 1/2. So sure enough, this is halfway between 0 and 3. So if we wanted to shade that in, we would shade in So if we were looking at 1/2 of 3 inches, we would see that that is in fact 3 halves, or 1 and 1/2 of an inch. Or 1/2 times 3 would be 3 halves, or 1 1/2. So what we're trying to look at between number 1 and number 2. On number 1, we're multiplying 3 times 1/2, and we get 3 halves because there are 3 halves that we shaded. If we're looking at half of 3 inches, which is simply just switching the 1/2 and the 3, or the 3 and the 1/2, then we still get the same product or the same answer. But if you look at what we shaded, it kind of asks 2 different questions. Here, they wanted to know if we had 3 groups of 1/2, how much would we have? That is 3 halves. Here, we wanted to know if we had, how much is half of 3, meaning half of 3 inches total. Either way, we shaded in the same amount of the ruler and we got the same answer. So that proves to us that when we're working with multiplication and fractions, it doesn't matter the order that it goes in, because we're still going to get the same answer. Whether the 3 came first or the 3 came second, we got the same answer. Let's go ahead and go to page 392. All right, on page 392, it says this: shade and label the ruler to find the length of 1/4 of 1/2 of an inch. Complete the sentence and the multiplication equation that represents the total length you shaded. So first of all, we're trying to find out what is 1/4 of 1/2. So what we need to do is, first of all, before we even start, we need to find out what is 1/2 of an inch. So I'm going to go ahead, and I know that here is 0 and here is 1, and halfway between 0 and 1 is 1/2 of an inch. Now, Then I need to find out what is 1/4 of 1/2. So now I'm looking at this section here, and I want to know how much is 1/4 of this section here. To do that, I'm going to use the denominator. This denominator is going to help me break up this part, this section, into smaller pieces to figure out how many I have to shade in. Now I'm going to use the denominator to tell me how many parts to break this apart in. So I'm going to break it in 4 parts. So I'm going to break it into, since it's 4, I'm going to break it into half, and then into half, and then into 1/2. So I have here, from 0 to this last line is 1/2 of an inch. I want to know what is 1/4 of 1/2. So if I broke this 1/2 into 4 parts, I'm going to shade in 1/4 of 1/2. So this is 1/4 of 1/2, but we're not done yet. We need to find out what is the value of this section here. Well, we have to figure out how many parts would be in one whole to help us to know how much this is, because we can't just say this is 1/4 of 1/2, but we don't know what that really means. So if we broke this second half of the inch up into the same amount of parts, they're all equal parts. That's the really important part. Now we know that we have 1 part shaded. So 1 is going to be our numerator, but we don't know what our denominator is. To find what our denominator is, we need to add all of these parts. So let's count. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 is going to be our denominator. So when we want to know what 1/4 of 1/2 is, we know it is 1/8 of an inch. So therefore, saying that 1/4 of 1/2 of an inch is 1/8 of an inch, the word of is the same as using a multiplication symbol. 1/4 times 1/8, or 1/4 of 1/4 times 1/2, or 1/4 of 1/2 is 1/8. I also kind of want you to look at this equation and look at your answer and look for maybe something that is interesting to you. And I want you just to say out loud, what do you notice or what do you recognize about this equation and this final product? What do you see? Is there something that you see that you know there? Maybe perhaps there is a math fact that you see that, or you see maybe a way that you could do this a little bit differently. Just keep that in the back of your mind because we're going to be using that later for sure. Number 4 wants us to shade and label the ruler to show 3/4 of 1/2 of an inch. So what is 3/4 of 1/2 of an inch? And then we're going to write a multiplication equation that represents the total length you shaded. So first of all, remember that second number is how much we're going to draw on our ruler. So this is our 1/2 of an inch right there, okay? Then we're going to break it apart into the number of parts in the denominator. So we're going to break it into 4 parts because the denominator is 4. And then we're going to shade in the numerator, whatever the numerator is. And in this case, the numerator is 3. So we're going to shade in 3 of these fourths. So now our picture shows that we have shaded in 3/4 of 1/2. But so we are looking at what is 3/4 of, remember that multiplication symbol is the same as saying of, 3/4 of 1/2. Now remember that we know that we have 3 parts. So we know up here we had 1 part, so our numerator was 1. Here we've shaded in 3 parts, so our numerator will be 3. But we don't know what our denominator is. In order to find out what our denominator is, we need to find out how many parts we have in a whole. Because before we only were doing how many parts we had in a half, okay? So how many parts are there all together? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 parts. So our denominator is going to be 8. So 3/4 of 1/2 equals 3/8, or 3/4 times 1/2 equals 3/8. Hopefully this is making a little bit of sense, but if not, don't worry, we'll do a couple of days of this and we will do some practice as well. So reflect. Based on the 2 problems above, explain how to find 2/4 of 1/2, or 2/4 times 1/2. So first you would divide 1/2 into 4 equal parts because the denominator is 4. Then you would figure out what part you need to have shaded. So if we drew on a ruler and we drew our 1/2, we broke it into 4 parts, we would shade in 2 parts. So this would be the number of equal parts in 1/2, and then this would be the part that we shade. Now, remember, in order to find the final product, we need to figure out how many parts are in the whole. And we know from up here that if we're breaking it into parts that are 4 parts in each half, we know we have 8 parts in a whole. So 2/4 of 1/2, or 2/4 times 1/2 equals 2/8. And then I also added here that 2/8 is a fraction that you could reduce to a smaller value of 1/4. If you divided both the numerator and the denominator by 2, you could reduce 2/8 to 1/4. It's okay if you don't reduce your fraction. You can go ahead and leave it as 2/8 and you would still get the answer right. So we're going to go ahead now and move over to our graphic organizer. In the graphic organizer, today we're going to be talking about equal parts. Equal parts are important because in order to solve a lot of problems using fractions and using drawings, you need to have equal parts. And so equal parts are parts of a whole that have the same value, the same size, or the same amount. So if we had this one whole, this whole thing is one whole, and we've taken this one whole and divided it into 5 equal parts, and each part is 1/5. 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 would equal 5/5, which is the same as one whole. This rectangle here is drawn into 3 equal parts. This circle is drawn into 4 equal parts. As you can see, each of these parts is the same amount, or as best as we can draw. Now these two do not have equal parts. This bar graph here has this one like small section, and then this much larger section, and then this medium-sized section. These 3 parts are not equal, so we could not call those equal parts. Or this circle has been broken apart into 4 sections, but none of those sections really are equal. Like this section is a little bit smaller than this section, and then this section here is much larger than this section, and then none of them are really the same. So both of these are non-examples, meaning these are not equal parts. These are equal parts. With that, you're going to go ahead and finish page 393, number 2. And then both number 3 and number 4 on page 394. After you finish that, if you have any questions, you can always email your teacher. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow for more using multiplication by a fraction.